All right, welcome back, Prospect Live viewers. We are back with another 2020 MLB Draft team preview. Today, joining me is Eddie Almaguer from Prospects Live. We're going to be breaking down Eddie's hometown team, the Miami Marlins. Of course, picking at third overall in the draft. Eddie, thanks for joining me. Let's pull up the graphic here and get into it, right? Real quick question, really overall, how do you sort of view this particular regime's draft history? They've had some misses, they've had some hits. What do you think in the direction is going to be going into this draft?
Yeah, it's so their director of amateur scouting, DJ Svilik, really his mentality is he's saying go with what you know, right? So go with the known assets, especially in a year where you've been cut short and your looks are limited. He has some ties to Vanderbilt. He was an assistant coach for a bit. Essentially what you want with this class is they were prep picks for the last 7 first rounds. The one that broke that trend was JJ Bleday last year from Vanderbilt. Now we're talking Austin Martin is now a potential pick at 3 for the team. So as we're looking as this team's trajectory is changing from let's get the high upside guys, prep guys, hope we hit the lotto. Now it's okay. A lot of names are creeping into the AA, AAA market. Jesus Sanchez, Monty Harrison, Jazz Chisholm. These guys are all at the pinnacle of arriving. Let's get some accelerated bats that don't need too much seasoning to then bring them back into the conversation, which is part of the reason as we bring up the video here, Austin Martin is maybe the most attractive name that they're going to get. Certainly, as you saw in the graphic, take what's there. Spencer Torkelson, Asa Lacy, Austin Martin. It's a win-win situation for the Marlins, but Austin Martin would be nice. They do have Jazz Chisholm as the sort of de facto future shortstop, but beyond him, it's a lot of defensive wizards like Nasim Nunez, Jose Salas, but those guys are pretty far away, and their impact with the bat isn't pretty great. So Austin Martin would provide a nice secondary option to Jazz Chisholm and maybe surpass him given his floor.
Well, they're one of the more interesting teams in the draft, just in terms of what the resources are from a draft pool perspective, meaning the amount of money that they have to spend on actual picks. And, they don't have a bunch of picks, bunched up between the CBA and the first round and the second. They're not one of those teams like the Royals, but they have a ton of money to really spend between the first, second, and third rounds. Between the 3 rounds, what are some names that you're hearing associated with the team outside of Austin Martin from Vanderbilt?
Yeah, so in our mock 3.0, we mentioned that Zach Veen was a possibility. Zach Veen just keeps rising up on draft boards as potential underslots for even as high as the Royals at number 2. But really, the question is, if it's not Zach Veen, who would be an underslot deal, and for those maybe not unaware, but Zach Veen, top prep bat in the draft class. Mm-hmm. If they save underslot, they can maybe at pick 40, I think, Mike, if we can bring that graphic back up, pick 40, 42, it would be, I don't know, Ralph, is a Blaze Jordan, would he be an overslot guy? Do you think he'd reach the Marlins comp B balance pick?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. There's been some rumors that he could go, I think, a few picks earlier in that competitive balance round A to the Indians. There's a chance that they could potentially land Jordan there. And there's some other interesting names as well in terms of the college arm market that are going to be available. Schuster, maybe an Ian Seymour, someone like that. Any other names that, you've sort of had in mind in that second round?
See, the unique thing about a 5-round draft, not just for the Marlins, but for other teams, is do you play it safe all around, or do you really start honing in on your needs as an organization? And the Marlins, they need catchers and they need third basemen. So a potential could be someone like Gage Workman, teammate of Spencer Torkelson. Another guy could be Drew Bowser. Maybe that he's more maybe their third pick, 62, 76. Or maybe someone at 40 could be someone like Drew Romo, who's a defensive prep wizard catcher. But, at the plate, maybe he's not that great. But they got someone like Will Banfield, who's number 28 in our Marlins top 30, who's also good behind the plate, but has just struggled at the dish. He's probably going to be a backup catcher ultimately. So someone like Drew Romo, who already has that sort of innate plate skills already, a little bit of a foundation for him. He could be an attractive option. But again, it's like what I said. Do you go with your needs, or do you take best player available? And a 5-round draft screams best player available no matter what. So even though the Marlins are loaded with outfielders and pitchers throughout their entire organization, I mean, I'm not going to argue with them if they go with another pitcher at 40, for example, like a Chris McMahon or something. So it makes sense. But yeah, so for me, if I'm in the front office, if I'm in a megaphone shouting into the war room, it's take one of the big three and then just start playing the draft board after that. I don't know what if there's any underslot guys you can get at 40. At that point, you should probably be playing slot for these guys, but it'll be fun to see if they get creative and maybe they do take a Veen at 3. But my suggestion, Mr. DJ Sfilic, is take one of the top 3, smile, and take the certainty.
Absolutely. Good advice from Eddie Almaguer there. Thanks for joining me, Eddie. That was the 2020 MLB draft team preview for the Miami Marlins. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back with another.